There are moments when your entire world shatters with the sound of laughter. A pregnant woman stands alone in a golden ballroom, 500 pairs of eyes watching as the man she loves strips away her dignity with surgical precision. The crystal chandeliers cast shadows that dance like demons across marble floors, while whispered conversations slice through silk and shame. They say a woman scorned is dangerous, but they've never met a woman who built empires with her bare hands, only to watch the man she crowned king try to bury her alive. In the suffocating silence of betrayal, as designer gowns rustle with judgment and champagne glasses pause mid-sip, something ancient awakens in her chest. Not rage, not heartbreak. Something colder. Something that calculates interest on every slight, every dismissal, every moment they mistook her love for weakness. Tonight, she's dead weight. Tomorrow, she'll be their reckoning. Because some women don't just survive the fall, they learn to fly. And when they rise, empires tremble. The crystal chandeliers of Le Bernardin cast a golden glow over the most exclusive dinner party Manhattan had seen all year. 500 of New York's elite filled the opulent ballroom, their designer gowns and tailored suits creating a sea of wealth and power. The air buzzed with conversations about mergers, acquisitions, and the kind of deals that could change the world with a single signature. At the center of it all sat Elena Rodriguez Wellington, her hands gently resting on her 6-month pregnant belly as she watched her husband command the room like the king he believed himself to be. Marcus Wellington, 35 years old and worth $3 billion, stood at the podium with the confidence of a man who had never known failure. His tech financial empire, Wellington Industries, was celebrating its 10th anniversary, and tonight was meant to be their crowning moment. Elena should have been happy, should have been proud. After all, she had been there from the beginning, when Marcus was just an ambitious young entrepreneur with big dreams and bigger risks. She had used her Harvard law degree and sharp legal mind to help structure his early deals, had worked 18-hour days alongside him to build what would become one of the most successful fintech companies in the world. But as she sat there in her midnight blue maternity gown, custom designed to accommodate her growing belly while still maintaining elegance, Elena felt anything but celebrated. The past 6 months had been a slow descent into isolation. Marcus had gradually pushed her out of business decisions, claiming she needed to focus on the pregnancy. He had removed her from the company's legal team, saying it was for her own good, and recently, he had been coming home later and later, always with the scent of an unfamiliar perfume clinging to his clothes. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus's voice boomed through the microphone, drawing Elena's attention back to the stage. Wellington Industries has achieved something remarkable this year. We've not only doubled our profits, but revolutionized how the world thinks about financial technology. The crowd erupted in applause. Elena clapped politely, but her attention was drawn to the woman standing near the stage, watching Marcus with an intensity that made Elena's stomach churn. Isabella Sterling, 26 years old, the newly appointed vice president of marketing, was everything Elena used to be before pregnancy softened her edges and swelled her belly. Isabella was sharp, ambitious, and beautiful in that calculated way that came from expensive personal trainers and even more expensive cosmetic procedures. Elena had noticed the way Marcus looked at Isabella during board meetings, the way his voice softened when he spoke to her, the way his eyes lingered just a moment too long on her perfectly sculpted figure. Tonight, Isabella wore a red dress that hugged every curve, her blonde hair styled in waves that seemed to catch the light with every movement of her head. But success, Marcus continued, his gaze finding Isabella in the crowd, is not just about numbers. It's about surrounding yourself with the right people, people who understand vision, people who can execute that vision without being distracted. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Was that comment directed at her? She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, suddenly hyper-aware of how different she looked compared to the other women in the room. While they were all angles and designer perfection, she was round and soft, her body doing what nature intended but feeling foreign to her in this world of artificial beauty. The dinner progressed with course after course of carefully crafted cuisine, each dish a masterpiece that Elena barely tasted. She found herself studying the faces around her, these people she had once considered friends. Now they seemed to look through her, as if pregnancy had made her invisible, irrelevant to their world of power and influence. When the main course was cleared, Marcus stood again, this time walking to where Elena sat. For a moment, her heart lifted. Perhaps he was going to acknowledge her contribution to their success. Perhaps he was going to remind everyone that she had been his partner in building this empire. "I'd like to ask my beautiful wife to say a few words," Marcus announced, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Elena has been supportive throughout this journey." The word supportive hung in the air like an insult disguised as a compliment. Elena felt 500 pairs of eyes turned toward her, some curious, others pitying. She had been a formidable litigator once, capable of commanding a courtroom with her presence and her words. But now, carrying new life and feeling increasingly disconnected from the world she had helped create, she felt vulnerable in a way that terrified her. Elena rose slowly, her hand instinctively moving to her belly as she felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. The pregnancy had been difficult lately, with her blood pressure fluctuating and frequent dizzy spells that her doctor had warned her to take seriously. But Marcus had insisted she attend tonight's event, saying it would look bad if the co-founder's wife wasn't present for such an important celebration. As she stood, the room seemed to spin slightly. Elena gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself. But the combination of the pregnancy, the stress of recent weeks, and the emotional weight of feeling so isolated became overwhelming. Her knees buckled slightly, and she reached out for support. But instead of her husband's steadying hand, Elena found empty air. Marcus stood just 2 feet away, close enough to catch her, close enough to help, but he made no move toward her. Instead, his face showed something that cut deeper than any physical pain. Embarrassment. He was embarrassed by her. "Elena," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the microphone and across the silent ballroom. "You're making a scene. Maybe pregnant women shouldn't attend events like this. You should go home and rest. Let the adults discuss business." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. 500 people, investors, competitors, journalists, friends, all heard her husband dismiss her like a child having a tantrum. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft clink of someone setting down a wine glass too hard. Isabella Sterling rose from her seat near the stage, her movement fluid and graceful. "Marcus, darling, perhaps that was a bit harsh," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "But Elena, sweetie, you do look rather overwhelmed. These high-pressure events aren't really suitable for someone in your condition." The way Isabella said condition made pregnancy sound like a disease, something shameful to be hidden away. Elena felt tears threatening to spill, but years of legal training had taught her to maintain composure under fire. She would not break down in front of these people, would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. "You're right," Elena said quietly, her voice somehow carrying despite its softness. "I should go home." Marcus nodded, already turning back to the microphone. "The driver will take you. I'll be staying to finish the important conversations." As Elena gathered her small purse and wrap, she heard Marcus's voice boom out again. "Now, where were we? Ah, yes. Let me tell you about our exciting new initiatives, led by our brilliant VP of Marketing, Isabella Sterling." The walk to the exit felt like a death march. Elena kept her head high, her shoulders straight, but she could feel the weight of every gaze, could practically hear the whispered conversations that would start the moment she was gone. "Did you see how she almost fainted?" Marcus looked mortified. "I heard she's been having difficulties with the pregnancy. Maybe she's not cut out for this lifestyle anymore." Outside in the cool October air, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe. The driver, Thomas, had been with their family for 3 years and knew better than to make small talk when Mrs. Wellington was upset. He simply opened the door to the Bentley and helped her in with gentle care. As the car pulled away from the plaza, Elena caught a glimpse through the restaurant's windows of Marcus and Isabella, standing close together at the bar, their heads bent in intimate conversation. Isabella's hand rested lightly on Marcus's arm, and even from a distance, Elena could see the way her husband's face lit up in a way it hadn't when he looked at her in months. The 30-minute drive to their Hamptons estate passed in silence. Elena stared out the window at the city lights, then at the darker suburbs, then finally at the tree-lined roads that led to the gated community where their 8-bedroom mansion sat on 5 acres of perfectly manicured grounds. It was a beautiful house, a dream house, but tonight it felt like a prison. Thomas helped her to the front door, his weathered face kind with concern. "Shall I wait for Mr. Wellington, ma'am?" "No," Elena said softly. "I suspect he'll be very late tonight." Inside the house, Elena kicked off her designer heels and let her hair down from its elaborate updo. In the bathroom mirror, she looked at herself. Really looked. For the first time in weeks. When had she become this person? When had she allowed herself to become so dependent, so diminished? She remembered the woman she used to be. Elena Rodriguez had graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law School. She had been recruited by 3 of the top law firms in the country. She had never lost a case in her 5 years of practice before she met Marcus. She had been formidable, respected, feared in courtrooms across the East Coast. But love had changed her. Or what she had thought was love. Marcus had been charming, brilliant, and completely devoted to her in those early days. He had pursued her relentlessly, had made her feel like the most important person in his world. When he asked her to help him start his company, it felt like a natural partnership. When he proposed, it felt like destiny. Now, standing alone in their enormous master bathroom, Elena wondered when partnership had become patronization, when love had become tolerance, when respect had become humiliation. She walked to Marcus's side of the bathroom and opened his medicine cabinet, looking for antacids. The pregnancy had been causing terrible heartburn. Instead, she found something that made her blood run cold, a small jewelry box tucked behind his cologne bottles. Inside was a delicate diamond earring, clearly expensive, clearly not hers. Elena's hands shook as she examined the earring. She had never seen it before, would never have chosen something so ostentatious. It was the kind of jewelry that screamed for attention, the kind that Isabella Sterling would wear. With growing dread, Elena began searching through Marcus's belongings. In his dresser drawer, beneath his imported Italian socks, she found a second cell phone. Her fingers trembled as she powered it on, and what she found there shattered what remained of her heart. Text messages, hundreds of them, all to and from Isabella. "Missing you already. Tonight was perfect. Isabella, sent 2 hours ago. Can't wait to get rid of the dead weight. Soon, my love. Marcus, sent 90 minutes ago. She looked so pathetic tonight. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Isabella, sent 1 hour ago. After the baby comes, we'll start divorce proceedings. My lawyer says with her current state, she won't fight for much. Marcus, sent 45 minutes ago." Elena sank onto the edge of the bed, the phone falling from her nerveless fingers. Dead weight. That's what she had become to her husband, the man she had loved, supported, helped build an empire, saw her as dead weight to be discarded. But as the initial shock and pain began to fade, something else took its place. Anger. Cold, calculating anger. Elena Rodriguez Wellington was many things, but she was not weak. She was not helpless, and she was certainly not dead weight. She thought about the earring, about the secret phone, about the public humiliation. She thought about the way Marcus had stood by while Isabella insulted her, about how he had let her almost collapse without offering help. She thought about the years she had spent building his company, the nights she had worked while he slept, the deals she had structured, the legal problems she had solved. Most of all, she thought about the baby growing inside her, the child who would grow up hearing stories about how their father had thrown their mother away like garbage when she was no longer useful. No, That was not the story her child would hear. Elena picked up the secret phone and began scrolling through more messages, her legal mind automatically cataloging evidence. She photographed everything with her own phone, careful to capture timestamps and contact information. If Marcus wanted to play games, he had chosen the wrong opponent. But as she worked, another thought crept into her mind, a memory she had tried to bury for years. Her father, Alejandro Rodriguez, standing in their modest apartment in Queens, holding acceptance letters from Harvard Law School and a full scholarship offer. "Mija," he had said, tears in his eyes, "you're going to be somebody. You're going to show the world what the Rodriguez family is made of." She had been so determined to make it on her own, to prove she didn't need family money or connections. She had cut ties with her father when he tried to help with her law school expenses, insisting on paying her own way through student loans and part-time jobs. When she met Marcus, she had been proud to tell him she was self-made, that her success was entirely her own. But what she had never told Marcus, what she had never told anyone, was exactly who her father was. Alejandro Rodriguez wasn't just a proud immigrant father. He was the founder and CEO of Rodriguez Global Enterprises, a multinational conglomerate that made Marcus's $3 billion look like pocket change. Elena had wanted to prove herself without the Rodriguez name, had wanted her husband to love her for who she was, not what her family could provide. Now she realized that her pride, her desire for independence, had left her vulnerable when she needed protection most. As she sat in the silence of their bedroom, Elena made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, she would make a phone call she should have made years ago. Tomorrow, she would remind the world and her husband who Elena Rodriguez really was. But tonight, she would mourn the death of the love she had thought would last forever and prepare for a war that Marcus Wellington had no idea was coming. The sound of a car in the driveway reached her ears around 3 a.m. Elena had long since changed into comfortable pajamas and was sitting in the nursery she had been decorating, one hand on her belly, the other holding the evidence that would destroy her husband's life. She heard Marcus stumble up the stairs, clearly having had more to drink than was wise. He didn't even check on her, didn't wonder if she was okay after nearly collapsing at dinner. She heard him crash into their bed and immediately begin snoring. Elena smiled for the first time that evening. Let him sleep. Let him enjoy what might be his last peaceful night for a very long time. Because tomorrow, the real Elena Rodriguez was going to remind the world exactly what happened when you underestimated a woman who had everything to lose and nothing left to fear. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the nursery, casting soft patterns across the half-assembled crib and unopened boxes of baby clothes. Elena hadn't slept. Instead, she had spent the night sitting in the rocking chair she had picked out with such hope just months before, planning her next moves with the same methodical precision she had once used to dismantle opposing counsel in court. Marcus had left for the office early, probably to continue celebrating his successful evening with Isabella. He hadn't even knocked on the nursery door to check on his pregnant wife, hadn't bothered to ask if she was feeling better after last night's humiliation. His indifference was perhaps more telling than any of the cruel text messages Elena had discovered. At exactly 9 a.m., Elena picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in 5 years. Her hands were steady now, her mind crystal clear. The pregnancy symptoms that had plagued her yesterday seemed to have vanished, replaced by a cold determination that felt almost supernatural. Rodriguez Global Enterprises, Mr. Rodriguez's office, came the familiar voice of her father's longtime assistant, Maria. "Hello, Maria. This is Elena. I need to speak with my father." There was a pause and then a sharp intake of breath. "Elena Mija, is that really you?" "Yes, Maria, and I need his help." Within seconds, Elena heard the voice she had been too proud to miss. "Elena, my God, sweetheart, are you all right?" Alejandro Rodriguez was 62 years old, had built a business empire spanning 6 continents, and was known throughout the corporate world as a man who never showed weakness. But hearing his daughter's voice after 5 years of stubborn silence reduced him to nothing more than a worried father. Papa, Elena said, and for the first time since discovering Marcus's betrayal, her voice broke slightly. I need to come home. 90 minutes later, Elena sat in the back of a Rodriguez Global corporate helicopter, watching the Hamptons shrink beneath her as they flew toward Manhattan. She had packed only the essentials and the evidence, leaving behind the designer clothes and jewelry that Marcus had bought her. Where she was going, she wouldn't need costumes. The helicopter landed on the roof of the Rodriguez Global building, a gleaming 60-story tower that dominated a full city block in Midtown Manhattan. Elena had avoided this building for years, had driven past it countless times without acknowledging that it belonged to her family. Now, as she stepped onto the roof, she felt like she was finally coming home. Alejandro Rodriguez was waiting for her personally, something he never did for anyone. At 62, he was still an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded respect in any room. When he saw Elena, his composed businessman facade crumbled completely. Mija, he whispered, pulling her into his arms with infinite gentleness, careful of her pregnant belly. You look tired. Elena allowed herself exactly 1 minute to be her father's little girl again, to remember what it felt like to be unconditionally loved and protected. Then she stepped back, squared her shoulders, and became Elena Rodriguez, daughter of one of the most powerful men in the world. Papa, I need to tell you everything. In his corner office, with its panoramic views of Manhattan and walls lined with photos of global leaders and business titans, Elena laid out the complete story. She showed him the text messages, the secret phone, the earring. She described the public humiliation at Le Bernardin, the months of increasing isolation and dismissal. Alejandro listened in complete silence, his face growing darker with each revelation. When Elena finished, he sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers, a gesture she remembered from childhood that meant he was thinking very carefully about something. This Marcus, he said finally, his accent still faint after 40 years in America. He has no idea who you really are. Does he? I wanted to make it on my own, Elena admitted. I wanted him to love me for me, not for the Rodriguez name or money. And he did love you, Alejandro said gently. I could see it at your wedding, before you asked me not to interfere in your marriage. But somewhere along the way, he forgot what he had. More importantly, he forgot who he was dealing with. Elena looked out the window at the city sprawling below them. What do you know about Wellington Industries? Alejandro's smile was sharp as a blade. More than your husband realizes. Rodriguez Global has been watching his company for 2 years, waiting for the right moment to make an acquisition offer. His fintech innovations are impressive, but his company structure has some vulnerabilities. What kind of vulnerabilities? The kind that happen when a young CEO gets drunk on success and starts making decisions with his heart instead of his head. Your husband has been moving company assets around in ways that aren't entirely legal. We've been documenting everything, waiting for the right moment to approach him about a buyout. Elena felt her pulse quicken. You've been investigating Marcus. Standard due diligence. Mija. When Rodriguez Global considers acquiring a company, we learn everything about it, including the fact that his VP of marketing has been selling trade secrets to Technova Corp, Wellington Industries' biggest competitor. The room seemed to spin around Elena. Isabella is committing corporate espionage. Has been for 8 months. We have bank records, recorded phone calls, email evidence. Your husband's company is hemorrhaging proprietary information, and he's too distracted by his personal life to notice. Elena closed her eyes, pieces of a much larger puzzle suddenly clicking into place. How much of Wellington Industries could Rodriguez Global acquire? If we moved quickly and used our shell companies, we could control 80% within 6 weeks. Your husband would never see it coming. And if there were criminal charges filed against key personnel for corporate espionage and fraud, Alejandro leaned forward, his eyes bright with understanding. Then the company's value would plummet, making acquisition even easier. Elena, what are you thinking? Elena stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city where she had once been so happy, where she had built a life with a man who had now made it clear that life meant nothing to him. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that Marcus Wellington is about to learn a very expensive lesson about treating people like disposable objects." Over the next 4 hours, Elna worked with her father's top legal and financial teams to construct a plan that was both elegant and devastating. Rodriguez Global would begin acquiring Wellington Industries stock through 12 different shell companies, staying just below the disclosure thresholds that would alert Marcus to what was happening. Simultaneously, Elena would gather additional evidence of Marcus and Isabella's crimes, working with the FBI's white-collar crime unit to build an airtight case. The federal investigation would remain sealed until the perfect moment to reveal it. "There's something else," Elena said as they finalized the details. "Wellington Industries is hosting their annual shareholder gala in 6 weeks. It's their biggest event of the year, with all major investors and board members attending. Marcus is planning to announce Isabella's promotion to COO at that event." "Perfect," Alejandro smiled. "By then, we'll own the company. You can make your own announcements." Elena spent the following weeks in a private apartment Rodriguez Global maintained for visiting executives, watching her husband's empire crumble in real time while he remained completely oblivious. Every day brought new stock acquisitions, new evidence of Isabella's corporate espionage, new proof of Marcus's financial mismanagement. The pregnancy, as if responding to Elena's renewed sense of purpose, became easier. Her energy returned, her mind sharpened, and she felt more like herself than she had in months. She worked with Rodriguez Global's legal team to document everything, ensuring that when the hammer fell, there would be no escape for either Marcus or Isabella. Marcus, meanwhile, seemed to be accelerating his own destruction. The secret phone Elena had cloned revealed increasingly reckless behavior. He was transferring company assets to Isabella without board approval, had given her access to proprietary systems she had no business touching, and was planning to divorce Elena immediately after their child was born. "Look at this." Elena showed her father a particularly damning text message. "Marcus is telling Isabella he's going to make her the majority owner of Wellington Industries after they get married." "Impossible." Alejandro frowned. "He doesn't have that authority. The board would never approve it. Unless he's planning to circumvent the board entirely. Look at these financial transfers." Elena pulled up documents on her laptop. "He's been moving assets into subsidiary companies that Isabella controls. If this continues, she'll effectively own Wellington Industries without the board even knowing." "That's criminal fraud," Alejandro said grimly. "Your husband isn't just having an affair, Elena. He's committing multiple felonies." Elena felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. "Good. That makes what we're going to do to him completely legal." 3 weeks into their operation, Elena received an unexpected call on her old cell phone. Marcus, apparently, had finally noticed his wife's absence. "Elena, where the hell are you? I came home and you're gone. Your clothes are gone. What kind of game are you playing?" Elena looked out at the Manhattan skyline from her temporary apartment. "I'm not playing any games, Marcus. I'm just giving you what you wanted." "What I wanted? What are you talking about? Space to conduct your business without dead weight getting in the way?" There was a long silence. "Elena, if this is about the other night at Le Bernardin, you're being ridiculous. You embarrassed yourself. Not me." "Did I? Because I seem to remember you being the one who chose to humiliate his pregnant wife in front of 500 people rather than help her when she was feeling faint." "You were being dramatic," Marcus said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone that had become so familiar. "Look, whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Come home. People are starting to ask questions about where you are." "What people? Investors, board members? It looks bad when the CEO's wife just disappears." Elena almost laughed. Even now, Marcus was only concerned about appearances, about how her absence affected him. "Tell them I'm taking care of my health and the baby's health. Tell them I'll see them at the shareholder gala." "You're coming to the gala." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Elena said, and hung up. That evening, Elena received the call she had been waiting for. FBI agent Sarah Chen, who had been working with Rodriguez Global's legal team, had completed her investigation into Isabella's corporate espionage. "We have her dead to rights," Agent Chen reported. "Bank records, recorded conversations with Technova representatives, email evidence of trade secret theft. We also have evidence that Mr. Wellington has been an unwitting accomplice, transferring classified information to Ms. Sterling without proper authorization." "Unwitting?" Elena questioned. "Well, that was our initial assessment, but some of these transfers are so blatant, so obviously inappropriate, that we're beginning to think he might have known what she was doing." Elena thought about the text messages, about Marcus's promises to make Isabella rich beyond her dreams. "I think you're right. I think they've been working together. If that's the case, then we're looking at conspiracy charges for both of them. Ms. Rodriguez Wellington, are you prepared to testify if this goes to trial?" Elena looked down at her growing belly, thought about the child who would soon be born into this mess. "Agent Chen, I've been preparing for this my entire legal career. With the FBI case locked and loaded, and Rodriguez Global's acquisition nearly complete, Elena had one final detail to arrange her grand entrance at the shareholder gala. She spent hours working with her father's public relations team to plan every aspect of her return, from her entrance to her speech to the devastating revelations that would destroy Marcus and Isabella's lives forever. The night before the gala, Elena stood in front of the mirror in her childhood bedroom at her father's estate, trying on the dress she had chosen for tomorrow's confrontation. It was black, elegantly cut to accommodate her now 8-month pregnancy, and it made her look every inch the powerful woman she had always been underneath Marcus's attempts to diminish her. Alejandro knocked on her door and entered, carrying a small jewelry box. "I thought you might want to wear these tomorrow," he said, opening the box to reveal her grandmother's diamond earrings, the ones Elena had inherited but never worn, thinking them too ostentatious. "Perfect." Elena smiled, thinking of Isabella's gaudy jewelry. "Let's remind everyone who I really am." As she prepared for bed, Elena felt the baby kick strongly against her ribs, as if even the child was eager for tomorrow's confrontation. She placed her hand on her belly and whispered, "Don't worry, little one. Mama's going to make sure you grow up in a world where people know better than to underestimate the Rodriguez family." Tomorrow, Marcus Wellington would discover that the woman he had dismissed as dead weight was actually the daughter of the most powerful man he had never bothered to research. Tomorrow, Isabella Sterling would learn that corporate espionage had consequences. And tomorrow, Elena Rodriguez Wellington would reclaim not just her dignity, but her husband's entire empire. The war was about to begin, and Elena had already won. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a glittering showcase of corporate excess. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across white tablecloths adorned with centerpieces that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Wellington Industries' annual shareholder gala was the social event of the financial season, and tonight's guest list read like a who's who of American capitalism. Marcus Wellington stood at the entrance greeting guests, his custom Tom Ford tuxedo perfectly tailored, his smile radiating the confidence of a man who believed he owned the world. Beside him, Isabella Sterling looked every inch the perfect corporate wife-in-waiting, her red Valentino gown stunning and her manner suggesting she belonged in these rarefied circles. What Marcus didn't know was that 78% of his company now belonged to Rodriguez Global Enterprises. What Isabella didn't know was that FBI agents were stationed at every exit, waiting for the signal to make their arrests. And what neither of them knew was that the woman they had dismissed and betrayed was about to walk through those doors with the power to destroy them both. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced to the assembled crowd of 500 investors, board members, and financial journalists, "welcome to Wellington Industries' most successful year yet." The applause was thunderous. Marcus had always been a gifted speaker, able to command a room with his presence and his vision. Elena had fallen in love with that confidence once, had believed in his dreams and worked tirelessly to make them reality. Now, watching from the monitors in the hotel's security office, where she waited with her father and their legal team. She felt nothing but cold calculation. This year has been about transformation, Marcus continued, his arms sliding possessively around Isabella's waist. About recognizing talent and promoting it. About building the future with the right people by our side. Isabella smiled adoringly up at Marcus, playing her part perfectly. She had no idea that every bank account she had open to receive her bribes from Technova was being watched, that every conversation she had thought was private had been recorded, that her carefully constructed facade was about to crumble in front of the most powerful people in American business. Tonight, Marcus announced, I'm proud to introduce you to the future of Wellington Industries. Isabella Sterling, who will be our new Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately. The crowd erupted in applause once again. Several board members looked surprised. This promotion hadn't been discussed or approved, but they maintained their professional composure. Isabella stepped forward to accept the microphone, her smile brilliant and her manner suggesting she deserved this moment. Thank you all so much, Isabella began, her voice carrying perfectly across the ballroom. Wellington Industries has become my life, my passion, my future. Under Marcus's leadership, we're going to... The lights went out. For a moment, the ballroom was plunged into complete darkness. 500 of the most powerful people in America sitting in confused silence. Then, slowly, a single spotlight illuminated the grand entrance at the back of the ballroom. Elena Rodriguez Wellington stepped through the doors like a queen returning to reclaim her throne. She had chosen her entrance carefully, understanding the power of theater in moments like these. Her black maternity gown was cut from the finest silk, its elegance unmistakable even as it accommodated her 8-month pregnancy. Her grandmother's diamond earrings caught the spotlight, throwing sparkles across her face like stars. Her dark hair was pulled back in a classic chignon that emphasized the regal bearing she had inherited from generations of Rodriguez women who had refused to be diminished by lesser men. But it wasn't just Elena's appearance that silenced the room. It was the man walking beside her. Alejandro Rodriguez was a legend in the business world, a titan whose empire spanned 6 continents and whose approval could make or break entire industries. Seeing him at Elena's side, his hand protectively on her arm, sent shockwaves through the assembled crowd. Investors began whispering urgently to each other. Board members pulled out their phones to check stock prices, and journalists started taking pictures with their telephoto lenses. Behind Elena and her father came a phalanx of people Marcus didn't recognize, but instinctively feared Rodriguez Global's top executives, their legal team, and several individuals whose conservative suits and alert postures screamed federal law enforcement. The spotlight followed Elena as she walked slowly down the center aisle between the tables, her head held high, her eyes fixed on the stage where Marcus and Isabella stood frozen in shock. Every step was measured, deliberate, designed to give everyone in the room time to understand that something monumental was happening. Marcus found his voice first. Elena, what are you doing here? Elena stopped directly in front of the stage, close enough that her voice would carry without a microphone, far enough that she commanded the attention of the entire room. When she spoke, her words carried the authority of a woman who had never been defeated in a courtroom and had no intention of starting now. Hello, Marcus. Isabella. Her voice was warm honey over steel blades. I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I have some announcements to make. This is inappropriate, Isabella said, trying to maintain control of the situation. This is a private corporate event, and you're no longer what? Elena interrupted, her eyebrows rising in polite inquiry. No longer the co-founder of this company, no longer the legal architect who structured every major deal for the first 7 years. Or do you mean no longer welcome because my husband decided I was dead weight that needed to be discarded? A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Elena's words, amplified by the room's perfect acoustics, reached every corner. Several people began recording with their phones, understanding that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. Marcus stepped forward, his face pale but his voice attempting authority. Elena, You're clearly not thinking straight. Pregnancy hormones can cause. Pregnancy hormones? Elena laughed, the sound echoing off the ballroom's high ceilings. Marcus, darling, let me save you some embarrassment. My thinking has never been clearer. She gestured, and Alejandro Rodriguez stepped forward, extending a leather portfolio toward the stage. Mr. Wellington, I believe you'll want to see what's in there. Marcus took the portfolio with shaking hands, Isabella peering over his shoulder as he opened it. The documents inside made his face go from pale to gray to green in rapid succession. Ladies and gentlemen, Elena announced to the room, I'd like to introduce my father, Alejandro Rodriguez, CEO and founder of Rodriguez Global Enterprises. As of this afternoon, Rodriguez Global owns 78% of Wellington Industries. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Investors shouted questions, board members demanded explanations, and journalists fought to get closer to the action. Through it all, Elena stood calm and collected, one hand resting on her pregnant belly, the other holding the microphone that had somehow materialized from her father's security team. How is this possible? Marcus shouted over the noise, his careful composure completely shattered. This is my company. I built this. You built it with my help, Elena corrected, her voice cutting through the chaos. You built it with my legal expertise, my connections, my late nights and early mornings. You built it while I was your partner. But then you decided I was dead weight. Remember, Isabella grabbed the microphone from Marcus's nerveless fingers. This is insane. You can't just walk in here and take over a company. You're absolutely right, Isabella. I can't just take over a company. Elena's smile was sharp as broken glass. That's why Rodriguez Global followed all proper legal procedures. Every stock purchase was legitimate. Every acquisition was properly filed. Every regulatory requirement was met. Unlike some people in this room, Elena nodded toward the federal agents positioned around the ballroom's perimeter. They began moving toward the stage with purposeful strides. Isabella Sterling, Agent Sarah Chen announced as she reached the stage, her badge clearly visible. You're under arrest for corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The room erupted again as Isabella was placed in handcuffs. She struggled against the agents, her carefully styled hair falling into her face, her perfect makeup running as she began to cry. This is impossible, Marcus. Do something. Tell them I was acting on your orders. My orders. Marcus backed away from Isabella as if she were radioactive. I never told you to, Marcus Wellington. Agent Chen continued implacably. You're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, unlawful transfer of corporate assets, and accessory to corporate espionage. As the handcuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists, he finally seemed to understand the magnitude of what was happening. His empire, his future, his freedom. All of it was disappearing in front of 500 witnesses and countless recording devices. Elena, please, he begged, his voice breaking with desperation. I know I made mistakes, but you can't do this. Think about our baby. Think about our life together. Elena walked closer to the stage, close enough that Marcus could see the complete absence of love or pity in her eyes. Marcus, I did think about our baby. I thought about the child who would grow up hearing how their father publicly humiliated their mother when she was pregnant and vulnerable. I thought about the legacy you were planning to leave them, a legacy of betrayal and cruelty. She paused while letting her words sink in. But mostly, I thought about the text messages. Marcus's face went white. What text messages? Elena pulled out her phone and began reading, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent ballroom. Can't wait to get rid of the dead weight. Soon, my love. After the baby comes, we'll start divorce proceedings. My lawyer says with her current state, she won't fight for much. She looks so pathetic tonight. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Each quote hit Marcus like a physical blow. Around the ballroom, the assembled crowd listened in stunned silence to the private thoughts of a man they had respected. a man who had just revealed himself to be capable of casual cruelty toward the woman carrying his child. "You read my private messages," Marcus whispered. "I read the messages on the secret phone you thought I didn't know about," Elena corrected. "The phone you used to coordinate with Isabella while she was selling our company's secrets to Technova Corp. The phone that contained evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and enough corporate crimes to put you both away for decades." As Marcus and Isabella were led away in handcuffs, the ballroom remained in stunned silence. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. Others joined in, and within moments, Elena was receiving a standing ovation from 500 of the most powerful people in American business. But Elena wasn't finished. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "effective immediately, Wellington Industries will be restructured as a subsidiary of Rodriguez Global Enterprises. The company will be renamed Rodriguez Wellington Enterprises, and I will be serving as CEO." She paused, her hand moving to her belly as she felt her child kick strongly, as if the baby was celebrating along with her. "Our first order of business will be implementing new ethical guidelines and security protocols to ensure that what happened here tonight never happens again. Our second will be launching a foundation to support women entrepreneurs who have been betrayed or abandoned by their business partners." The applause was thunderous now, a celebration not just of Elena's victory, but of justice served with perfect, devastating precision. As the crowd began to disperse, Elena found herself surrounded by investors, board members, and journalists, all eager to speak with the woman who had just orchestrated one of the most dramatic corporate takeovers in modern history. But through the chaos, she spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Dr. Gabriel Santos, a renowned psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery, had been watching the evening's events with professional interest and personal admiration. Elena had met him months ago at a medical conference when she was researching therapy options for postpartum support. He had struck her as kind, intelligent, and utterly different from the ruthless business types she usually encountered. "That was extraordinary," Gabriel said when he reached her side, his warm brown eyes full of respect. "I've never seen anyone handle a confrontation with such precision and grace." "Thank you," Elena smiled, feeling truly happy for the first time in months. "Though I have to admit, it felt pretty good to finally tell the truth about what kind of man Marcus really is." "If you don't mind me saying," Gabriel continued, "you're going to need support in the coming months. Legal proceedings, corporate restructuring, and a new baby. That's a lot for anyone to handle alone." Elena looked around the ballroom at the wreckage of her old life and the foundation of her new one. "You know what, Dr. Santos, I don't think I'm going to be alone anymore." As the evening wound down and the last of the guests departed, Elena stood with her father on the plaza's famous balcony, looking out over Central Park and the city that would soon know her name in an entirely different context. "Are you ready for what comes next, mija?" Alejandro asked, his arm around his daughter's shoulders. Elena placed both hands on her belly, feeling her child's strong kicks and thinking about the world she was building for the next generation. "Papa, I've been ready my whole life. I just forgot for a while." The war was over. Elena Rodriguez Wellington had won everything. But more importantly, she had remembered who she was, not dead weight to be discarded, but a force of nature to be reckoned with. And Marcus Wellington, sitting in a federal holding cell, was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. 1 year later, Elena Rodriguez Wellington stood in the corner office of the Rodriguez Wellington Enterprises Tower, a gleaming 45-story building that had become the new symbol of ethical business practices in Manhattan. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the numerous awards and recognitions that now adorned her walls: Businesswoman of the Year from Forbes, Ethical Leadership Award from Harvard Business School, and Corporate Transformation of the Decade from the Wall Street Journal. But Elena's attention wasn't on the accolades. Instead, she was focused on the 9-month-old baby in her arms, little Diego Rodriguez Wellington Santos, who had inherited his mother's dark eyes and his father's gentle spirit, though his father wasn't Marcus. "Good morning, mi amor," came a warm voice from the doorway. Dr. Gabriel Santos entered the office carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the kind of smile that had convinced Elena to take a chance on love again. They had married 6 months ago in a small ceremony attended only by family and close friends. A celebration of new beginnings rather than the elaborate society spectacle her first wedding had been. "Any word from the prosecutors?" Gabriel asked, settling into the chair across from Elena's desk as she placed Diego in his nearby playpen. "Marcus and Isabella were both sentenced yesterday," Elena replied, accepting her coffee gratefully. "Marcus got 12 years for conspiracy, fraud, and corporate espionage. Isabella got 8 years. They'll be eligible for parole, but not for at least 6 years." Gabriel nodded thoughtfully. "How do you feel about that?" It was such a therapist's question that Elena had to smile. Even a year later, Gabriel couldn't quite turn off his professional instincts when it came to helping people process trauma and recovery, but she loved him for it. Loved the way he had helped her rebuild not just her business empire, but her faith in genuine partnership. "I feel like justice was served," Elena said honestly. "But more than that, I feel like I've moved beyond needing to think about them at all." This was true. The woman who had once been devastated by Marcus's betrayal had transformed into someone who rarely dwelled on the past, too busy building an extraordinary future. Rodriguez Wellington Enterprises had become one of the most successful and ethical companies in the financial technology sector, with innovations that were revolutionizing how small businesses accessed capital and how underserved communities built wealth. Elena had kept the best parts of Marcus's original vision while eliminating the toxic culture that had allowed corruption to flourish. She had implemented employee ownership programs, ethical oversight committees, and mentorship initiatives that had become models for other corporations worldwide. But her proudest achievement wasn't business-related. It was the Phoenix Rising Foundation, which had provided support, funding, and legal assistance to over 50,000 women who had experienced betrayal, abandonment, or abuse in their personal or professional lives. The foundation's residential centers offered everything from therapy and legal aid to business development and childcare, creating comprehensive support systems that helped women rebuild their lives stronger than before. "Mrs. Santos," came a voice from the intercom. Elena had kept her professional name, but had legally become Elena Rodriguez Wellington Santos in her personal life. "Your 10 o'clock appointment is here. Send her in, please." The woman who entered Elena's office could have been Elena herself 5 years earlier, well-educated, professionally successful, but carrying the unmistakable weight of someone whose world had recently been shattered. Sarah Mitchell was a 32-year-old architect whose business partner and fiancé had stolen her designs, claimed credit for her work, and left her financially and emotionally devastated. "Ms. Mitchell." Elena stood to greet her visitor. "Please sit down. I've reviewed your case, and I want you to know that you're in the right place." Over the next hour, Elena and her team laid out a comprehensive plan for Sarah's recovery, legal representation to reclaim her intellectual property, financial support to start her own firm, and therapeutic resources to help her process the betrayal and rebuild her confidence. It was the kind of systematic, overwhelming support that Elena wished she had known to ask for during her own darkest hours. "I don't understand," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do all this for someone you don't even know?" Elena glanced at the photo on her desk herself. Gabriel and Diego at their beach house in the Hamptons, all three of them laughing as waves crashed around their feet. It was the picture of a family built on love, respect, and genuine partnership. Everything her first marriage hadn't been. "Because someone should have done it for me," Elena said simply. "Because no woman should have to face betrayal alone. And because I learned that the best revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's building something so beautiful and successful that their betrayal becomes irrelevant." After Sarah left, Elena returned to her desk to review the quarterly reports. Rodriguez Wellington Enterprises was on track to become a Fortune 500 company within 2 years, a remarkable achievement for a firm that had essentially been rebuilt from scratch. But the numbers that mattered most to Elena weren't profit margins or stock prices. They were the statistics from the Phoenix Rising Foundation. 50,000 women helped. 12,000 new businesses started by foundation alumni. 8,500 children who now had stable homes with mothers who had reclaimed their power. 200 pieces of legislation influenced by the foundation's advocacy work. These were the metrics of a life well lived, of trauma transformed into purpose. Gabriel appeared in her doorway again, this time carrying Diego, who had apparently decided his playpen was insufficient for his afternoon adventures. "He wants his mama," Gabriel said, transferring the baby to Elena's arms. "And I wanted to remind you that we have the Foundation Gala tonight." The annual Phoenix Rising Gala had become one of the most prestigious events in New York's social calendar, not because of its exclusivity, but because of its purpose. Tonight, they would honor 50 women who had rebuilt their lives after devastating betrayals, award grants to promising new entrepreneurs, and announce the foundation's expansion into international markets. "Are you nervous about the speech?" Gabriel asked, settling into the chair beside Elena's desk. Elena looked down at Diego, who was contentedly playing with her grandmother's diamond earrings, the same earrings she had worn to confront Marcus a year ago. The baby's fascination with the sparkling gems made her smile, reminding her that even the most painful chapters of life could become beautiful when viewed through the lens of growth and transformation. "No," she said honestly. "I know exactly what I want to say." That evening, the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom was once again filled with 500 of New York's most influential people. But this time, the energy was entirely different. Instead of corporate excess and competitive positioning, the room buzzed with stories of resilience, recovery, and renewal. The guests weren't here to make deals or display wealth. They were here to celebrate the extraordinary capacity of human beings to overcome betrayal and build something better. Elena took the stage wearing a midnight blue gown that complemented her post-pregnancy figure beautifully, her confidence radiating from every gesture. Gabriel sat at the head table, Diego sleeping peacefully in his arms, surrounded by the foundation's board members and staff who had become Elena's chosen family. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena began, her voice carrying easily across the ballroom. "A year ago, I stood in a room very much like this one and learned what it felt like to be publicly humiliated by someone I trusted. Tonight, I stand before you as proof that the worst moments of our lives can become the foundation for our greatest achievements." The applause was immediate and sustained, but Elena waited for quiet before continuing. "The Phoenix Rising Foundation exists because I learned that betrayal, while devastating, is not destiny. When someone we trust tries to diminish us, when they call us dead weight or treat us as disposable, they're revealing their own limitations, not ours." Elena paused, her eyes finding Gabriel in the crowd, then moving to the tables where dozens of foundation alumni sat with their families and supporters. "This year, our foundation has helped 15,000 women rebuild their lives after betrayal. We've funded 3,000 new businesses. We've provided legal representation to women fighting for what's rightfully theirs. And we've created a network of support that ensures no woman has to face her darkest hour alone." The room erupted in applause again, but Elena held up her hand for attention. "But here's what I want you to understand. This foundation isn't about revenge. It's not about destroying the people who hurt us. It's about something much more powerful. It's about building lives so extraordinary that betrayal becomes irrelevant." Elena gestured toward the screens around the ballroom, which began displaying photos and statistics from the foundation's workwomen starting successful businesses, children in stable homes, communities transformed by ethical leadership development programs. When someone tries to convince you that you're worthless, when they attempt to diminish your power or question your value, remember this: they're not describing you. They're revealing their own fear of what you might become when you remember who you really are. The standing ovation lasted for several minutes, but Elena wasn't finished. She had one more announcement to make, one that would cement her transformation from victim to victor to visionary leader. Tonight, I'm announcing the creation of the Global Phoenix Initiative, a program that will expand our work to support women in 25 countries who are rebuilding their lives after betrayal, abuse, or abandonment. This initiative will provide microloans, legal assistance, educational opportunities, and community support networks to ensure that every woman, regardless of her circumstances, has the chance to rise from her ashes stronger than before. The announcement sent ripples of excitement through the ballroom. Elena had just committed to a multi-billion-dollar initiative that would literally change the lives of millions of women worldwide, and she had the resources and influence to make it happen. As the gala continued around her, Elena stepped onto the plaza's famous balcony for a moment of quiet reflection. The city sparkled below her, full of lights and possibilities, and she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she had been a broken woman sitting alone in a nursery, planning revenge against a husband who had discarded her like garbage. Tonight, she was a global leader whose influence extended far beyond business, whose personal transformation had become a beacon of hope for millions of women worldwide. Gabriel joined her on the balcony, Diego now awake and gurgling happily in his father's arms. "Any regrets?" Gabriel asked, a question that had become their evening ritual during difficult moments in Elena's recovery. Elena took Diego from his father's arms, holding her son close as she looked out over the city that had witnessed both her destruction and her resurrection. "None," she said firmly. "Marcus's betrayal was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it was also the catalyst for the best things this foundation, our work together, our family, and discovering who I really am when I'm not trying to be smaller to make someone else comfortable." She paused, thinking about the women who would benefit from the Global Phoenix Initiative, about the lives that would be changed and the cycles of abuse that would be broken. "You know what the real victory is," Elena continued. "It's not that Marcus is in prison, or that I took over his company, or even that I've built something bigger and better than he ever imagined. The real victory is that I've become the woman I was always meant to be, and I'm using that power to help other women do the same." Diego reached up to touch his mother's face, his tiny fingers exploring her smile, and Elena felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. This was what happiness looked like, not the desperate, dependent love she had felt for Marcus, but the confident, grounded joy that came from knowing her own worth and using her gifts to serve something larger than herself. "What's next?" Gabriel asked, slipping his arm around his wife's waist. Elena looked down at their son, then out at the city full of women who didn't yet know they had the power to transform their lives, then back at the man who had helped her remember what partnership actually looked like. "Next, we change the world," she said simply, "one woman at a time." As they returned to the gala, Elena couldn't help but smile at the thought of Marcus Wellington in his federal prison cell, finally understanding the magnitude of what he had thrown away. She genuinely hoped he was getting the psychological help he needed, hoped he was learning to become a better person during his incarceration, but mostly, she didn't think about him at all, because Elena Rodriguez Wellington Santos had discovered something infinitely more satisfying than revenge. The joy of building a life so extraordinary that the people who had tried to diminish her became footnotes in a story much larger and more beautiful than they could ever have imagined. And as she watched Diego sleep peacefully in Gabriel's arms, while 500 guests celebrated the power of transformation and renewal, Elena knew that the best chapters of her story were still being written. The phoenix had risen, the queen had reclaimed her throne, and the world would never be the same. If this story inspired you, remember that, like Elena, you have the power to transform your life's greatest challenges into your most powerful victories. No matter what betrayals you faced, no matter how others have tried to diminish you, you have the strength to rise from the ashes and build something extraordinary. Share this story with someone who needs to remember their own power. Like and subscribe for more stories of triumph over betrayal, and let us know in the comments. What would you do if someone tried to convince you that you were dead weight? Remember, the best revenge is living so well that their betrayal becomes irrelevant